In the dark underworld of international drug trafficking, only a few names inspire as much fear and fascination as Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán. Once the most wanted man on earth, according to the United States of America, El Chapo ruled a sprawling empire of crime that spanned continents, eluded authorities, and turned the drug trade into a billion-dollar enterprise right from inside Mexico. His escapes were legendary.
The world's richest, most notorious drug kingpins broke out of prison.
Former cartel leader is considered one of the most dangerous drug traffickers in the world.
His methods ingenious.
El Chapo Guzmán is said to be between 5'5" and 5'6". It's basically custom built for his frame.
And his violence chilling. However, what most people don't know is the story of the man who finally brought him to justice. Behind the headlines, beyond the myth, beyond the complex connection between El Chapo and the Mexican government, stood a quiet yet relentless DEA agent, armed with nothing more than his grit, his wits, and an unwavering belief that no one, not even El Chapo, was untouchable. This is the story of how a determined lawman outsmarted one of the most cunning criminals in American and Mexican history. This is the story of the DEA agent who outsmarted Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán. Born and raised in the heartland of America, Andrew Hogan's journey into law enforcement began in a quiet, close-knit community, far removed from the chaos of the drug cartels he would later pursue. Growing up, Hogan was shaped by strong family values that instilled in him a deep sense of justice, discipline, and a commitment to doing what was right. From that young age, Hogan was drawn to stories of law enforcement heroes who stood up against crime and corruption. These tales sparked a dream within him to protect communities from harm and make a tangible difference in the world. The big question, however, was how. Hogan's passion for justice, coupled with a relentless curiosity about the inner workings of crime and law enforcement, set him on a path that would ultimately lead to the Drug Enforcement Administration. Andrew Hogan's journey into the Drug Enforcement Administration began in the early 2000s, during a time when the narcotics crisis was at the forefront of America's challenges. After completing the rigorous training program at the DEA Academy in 2006, Hogan officially became a special agent and was moved to Arizona to work as an undercover. His early days were spent learning the intricacies of drug enforcement, from understanding the complex networks behind the narcotics trade to mastering the skills needed for undercover operations and surveillance. It was a role that required not only physical resilience, but also sharp instincts and a tactical mind. Interestingly, Hogan possessed these qualities in abundance. Therefore, unsurprisingly, Andrew Hogan quickly built a reputation within the DEA as an exceptional agent with a relentless commitment to his mission. From the outset, he displayed an uncanny ability to use data and situational analysis, connect fragmented intelligence, and identify key players in the narcotics trade. His sharp instincts and tactical mind set him apart from his peers. He typically spends countless hours piecing together intelligence, often going beyond the call of duty to ensure no lead went unexamined. His success in dismantling domestic drug operations not only disrupted the supply chains, but also made a significant impact on the drug trade within the United States. This success in domestic drug enforcement soon caught the attention of his superiors. Recognizing his exceptional skills and relentless work ethic, the DEA tasked Hogan with a new challenge, joining their international operations to combat drug cartels operating beyond U.S. borders. Transitioning to the global stage was no small feat. Hogan entered a world where the rule of law was often overshadowed by violence, corruption, and the influence of powerful cartels alongside foreign jurisdictions, local cultures, and dangerous players who operated with near impunity. This new environment required not only his investigative expertise, but also adaptability and courage. Hogan's role expanded to include collaboration with international law enforcement agencies and navigating diplomatic sensitivities. This transition marked a pivotal chapter in Hogan's career, pushing him into the heart of the battle against the Sinaloa Cartel, a move that would eventually lead him to the most dangerous and elusive target of his career, Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán. The Sinaloa Cartel was one of the most powerful and ruthless criminal organizations in the world at that time, with its influence extending across continents, even up to Africa. Known for its sophisticated operations and violent tactics, the cartel dominated the global drug trade under the leadership of El Chapo Guzmán.
We need to have the concerted effort of both the Mexican government and the U.S. government in recapturing Mr. Guzmán.
For Andrew Hogan, the Sinaloa Cartel first came into focus during one of his international assignments. As Hogan delved deeper into intelligence on global drug operations, the cartel's name repeatedly surfaced. Its extensive network of drug trafficking routes, safe houses, and loyal operatives made it a dominant force in the narcotics world and a primary target for law enforcement. However, Hogan's introduction to the Sinaloa Cartel was not merely academic. It was also personal. His role required him to investigate how the cartel's operations infiltrated American cities, contributing to the devastating impact of drugs on communities. This went against his childhood belief. Moreover, the more he learned, the clearer it became that dismantling the Sinaloa Cartel would be one of the most challenging undertakings of his career. And from there, he first began piecing together the intricate web of connections that sustained the cartel's empire. First, it became clear that dismantling the Sinaloa Cartel would require extraordinary preparation. Hogan's mission was not just about apprehending a single individual. It was about dismantling an entire empire built on violence, deception, and corruption. Hogan's preparation began with a painstaking study of the cartel's operations. He analyzed intelligence reports, wiretaps, and surveillance data to map out the complex web of operatives, safe houses, and smuggling routes that sustained the cartel. Hogan also examined El Chapo's patterns, from his preferred escape methods to his communication networks, knowing that understanding the man was key to bringing him down. Collaboration became another cornerstone of Hogan's preparation. Recognizing that no single agency could take on the cartel alone, he worked closely with the Mexican Marines, U.S. law enforcement agencies, and local intelligence units. This cooperation allowed Hogan to pool resources, share intelligence, and develop a unified strategy that would eliminate redundancies and close gaps in the investigation. Hogan's preparation was exhaustive, methodical, and relentless. He knew that every detail mattered, and every lead could be the one that brought them closer to taking the United States of America many steps further in the fight against substance addiction plaguing the youth of the country. However, unbeknownst to Hogan, these initial investigations would lay the groundwork for his relentless pursuit of the man at the center of it all, El Chapo. Joaquín Archibaldo Guzmán Lora, infamously known as El Chapo, was born on April 4, 1957, in the rural village of La Tuna in the rugged mountains of Sinaloa, Mexico. Life in La Tuna was defined by poverty, with most families, including Guzmán's family, relying on subsistence farming to make ends meet. His family, headed by his father, Emilio Guzmán Bustillos, struggled financially, which is believed to have had a profound impact on El Chapo's upbringing. From an early age, Guzmán was exposed to the harsh realities of rural life, including the lure of the drug trade. His father, rumored to have been involved in opium production, introduced him to the cultivation of marijuana, a cash crop in the region. By his teenage years, Guzmán had already begun working in the drug trade, smuggling small amounts of marijuana to support his family. Despite his limited formal education, Guzmán exhibited a keen ambition and a natural aptitude for leadership. These traits would later serve him well as he ascended the ranks of the criminal underworld. His early years were marked by an insatiable drive to escape poverty, a goal that ultimately led him to pursue the dangerous path of organized crime. El Chapo's entry into organized crime began in the 1980s when he joined the Guadalajara Cartel, one of Mexico's dominant drug organizations at the time. Under the mentorship of Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, the cartel's leader, often referred to as El Padrino, which means the Godfather, Guzmán quickly learned the intricacies of the drug trade. Gallardo's influence provided him with access to drug distribution networks and taught him the importance of logistics and innovation in smuggling. Guzmán distinguished himself within the organization by his willingness to use extreme measures to ensure shipments were delivered on time. If delays occurred, he earned a reputation for ruthlessly executing anyone responsible, signaling his rise as a no-nonsense operator. Almost everybody trusted El Chapo to deliver. However, the Guadalajara cartel eventually disbanded following Gallardo's arrest in 1989. But when this happened, Guzmán seized the opportunity to establish his own operation. He co-founded the Sinaloa Cartel, leveraging the knowledge he had gained under Gallardo. The formation of the Sinaloa Cartel marked a pivotal moment in Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán's rise to power. This new organization quickly asserted its dominance by taking control of key drug routes, including the coveted Plaza smuggling corridor that bridged Mexico and the United States. Under Guzmán's leadership, the Sinaloa Cartel became synonymous with innovation and efficiency. Guzmán introduced groundbreaking smuggling methods, including the construction of intricate tunnels that spanned the U.S.-Mexico border. These tunnels were equipped with rail systems and ventilation, making them a reliable means of transporting massive quantities of narcotics without detection. Beyond tunnels, Guzmán expanded the cartel's operations to include various transportation modes such as submarines, planes, and tractor-trailers. Also, the cartel's strategy was not limited to logistics. Guzmán cultivated alliances with other criminal organizations and systematically eliminated rivals through violent means. Guzmán solidified his grip on drug routes and operations by waging brutal wars against competing cartels, turning regions like Sinaloa into blood-soaked battlegrounds. Towns and cities became sites of mass kidnappings and displays of public executions intended to instill fear and assert dominance. El Chapo was infamous for employing shocking tactics, including beheadings, dissolving bodies in acid, and mass graves for enemies and defectors. These gruesome displays were not only tools of intimidation, but also a clear signal to rival cartels and law enforcement that dissent or betrayal would be met with horrific consequences. The cartel's control extended beyond brute force. Guzmán effectively wielded corruption as another weapon, infiltrating local governments, police forces, and even national institutions. Through bribery, he ensured loyalty from those in power, making it nearly impossible for law enforcement to operate effectively in his territories. This combination of innovation, alliances, and ruthless tactics allowed the Sinaloa Cartel to establish itself as a global drug trafficking powerhouse, controlling markets across the Americas, Europe, Asia, and even Africa. This continued until 1993, when he was surprisingly arrested and jailed. Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán's first dramatic prison escape occurred in January 2001, 8 years after his arrest, cementing his reputation as a mastermind capable of evading even the most secure facilities. At the time, Guzmán was incarcerated at the Puente Grande maximum security prison in Jalisco, Mexico, following his arrest in 1993. Despite the prison's high security status, Guzmán managed to build a network of loyal accomplices within the facility, including guards and officials. Through strategic bribery, he turned the very individuals tasked with guarding him into collaborators. On the night of his escape, Guzmán was hidden in a laundry cart, smuggled out of the prison by a guard under the guise of routine operations. The escape humiliated Mexican authorities and significantly elevated Guzmán's mythos, portraying him as an untouchable figure in the eyes of both his allies and adversaries. Following his escape, Guzmán disappeared into the mountains of Sinaloa, further deepening his mystique as a fugitive. Even in some communities, El Chapo became a folk hero because of this jailbreak, despite the immense violence and destruction he left in his wake. However, this escape was not only a bold act of defiance, but also a calculated move that allowed him to rebuild and expand his drug empire. Following his escape, Guzmán expanded the cartel's reach even further, developing ingenious smuggling methods and amassing a fortune that would later land him on Forbes' billionaires list in 2009, with an estimated net worth of over $1 billion. However, at the same time, while amassing wealth, El Chapo's newfound freedom and brazen defiance of Mexican authorities made him a priority target for international law enforcement. His cartel's dominance in the U.S. drug market, especially the trafficking of cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine, drew the attention of the DEA. By this point, Guzmán's ability to evade capture had become a global embarrassment, and his reputation as the world's most wanted drug lord overshadowed even that of Osama bin Laden. Andrew Hogan's mission to capture Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán began with a carefully crafted plan to infiltrate the Sinaloa Cartel's vast network. Hogan knew that to gain actionable intelligence, he needed to embed himself within the cartel's operations without raising suspicion. His approach was to disguise himself as a money launderer, which was a role critical to the cartel's financial machinery. To make the disguise convincing, Hogan and his team created a fictional identity, complete with a legitimate-looking company that specialized in moving large sums of money. The company was designed to appear like a real business that facilitated the movement of illicit drug profits across international borders. Hogan rehearsed his backstory extensively, ensuring he could seamlessly portray himself as an experienced and discreet money handler who could deliver results without asking questions. The operation's success relied heavily on Hogan's ability to gain the trust of El Chapo's inner circle. He started by making connections with lower-ranking members of the cartel, presenting himself as a reliable partner who understood the cartel's need for discretion. Through these initial interactions, Hogan gathered valuable insights into the cartel's operations, including its communication methods and logistical strategies. As Hogan's cover deepened, he encountered moments of tension, particularly when cartel members probed his background or tested his loyalty. However, his meticulous preparation and calm demeanor allowed him to maintain his credibility, gradually moving closer to the individuals who could provide direct links to El Chapo. This phase of the operation laid the foundation for everything that followed. As Andrew Hogan's undercover mission progressed, it became increasingly clear that tracking Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán required proximity to the heart of the Sinaloa Cartel's operations. Hogan realized that to gather critical intelligence and respond quickly to new leads, he would need to relocate to Mexico. The move wasn't a simple one. Hogan had to have an honest and difficult conversation with his wife, explaining the importance of the mission and the sacrifices it would demand for their family. He emphasized the high stakes involved, both for law enforcement and for the communities devastated by the cartel's influence. Despite the dangers, his wife ultimately agreed to support the move, recognizing the vital role Hogan played in the pursuit of justice. Relocating to Mexico, Hogan needed to maintain his cover as a money launderer while ensuring that his family's presence didn't draw unwanted attention. Living in a foreign country with a secret mission, Hogan carefully balanced his responsibilities as a father and husband with the demands of his covered operation. To further complicate matters, Hogan often had to spend long stretches away from home, sometimes without communication, while working on sensitive aspects of the mission. These periods of separation weighed heavily on his family life, adding another layer of stress to an already high-pressure operation. With Andrew Hogan now operating from Mexico, he and his team back in the U.S. employed a combination of wiretaps, informants, and covert surveillance to penetrate the Sinaloa Cartel's vast network. Intercepting communications was no easy task. El Chapo's crew frequently changed phones and SIM cards, and their conversations were coded to prevent easy interpretation. Despite these obstacles, Hogan's team used sophisticated technology and relentless effort to break through the cartel's layers of operational security. These intercepted messages often hinted at El Chapo's whereabouts and revealed logistical details about his movements. And at some point, Hogan had access to every message sent across the Sinaloa Cartel members. The first major breakthrough came with the arrest of one of El Chapo's trusted associates, nicknamed The Nose. Under severe interrogation, he disclosed the locations of 5 safe houses used by El Chapo. However, it was hard to raid these safe houses, particularly because of the meticulous security measures and surveillance systems they had. One significant narrow escape occurred during a raid on a safe house that Hogan had meticulously tracked. The team approached the location with precision, relying on intelligence gathered from intercepted communications and surveillance. However, moments before they stormed the building, El Chapo escaped through one of his infamous underground tunnels, leaving behind his belongings, multiple notes containing several phone numbers, and even the dinner he was eating. The tunnel, hidden beneath a bathtub, led to the city's sewer system, allowing him to vanish without a trace. Interestingly, after the raid, Hogan, knowing his team needed where to stay and couldn't obviously roam around town to avoid increasing the already tense community, took over the safe house El Chapo had just abandoned. The team used it as a temporary base for their operations, eating and sleeping in the very space the fugitive had occupied hours earlier. Living in El Chapo's safe house provided deeper insight into his lifestyle, including his meticulous planning, the constant vigilance of his crew, and the resources he poured into his security. This experience deepened Hogan's understanding of his target and fueled the team's determination to close the gap in their pursuit. But at the same time, Hogan began to rethink his approach. He grew increasingly wary of collaborating with certain law enforcement agencies in Mexico, suspecting corruption and the potential for leaks. This mistrust led him to place greater reliance on the Mexican Marines, a highly disciplined unit known for its integrity and operational effectiveness. The Marines became Hogan's most trusted allies in the mission, forming the backbone of future operations. To Hogan, someone must have been leaking intelligence to El Chapo, which always made him one step ahead of these raids. But the big question was, who? Another critical adjustment came in Hogan's operational planning. He began prioritizing locations where civilian casualties could be minimized. Many of El Chapo's safe houses were located in densely populated areas, increasing the risk of collateral damage during any operation. Therefore, a misstep could result in the loss of innocent lives, a scenario he was determined to avoid at all costs. Simultaneously, Hogan's team continued to monitor the cartel's logistical operations, tracing deliveries and movements linked to El Chapo's safe houses. Each piece of intelligence brought them closer to pinpointing his location, but the process was painstakingly slow, as the cartel frequently altered its methods to evade detection. As the pursuit progressed, Andrew Hogan and his team focused on narrowing down Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán's movements. The breakthrough came from a relentless commitment to monitoring key members of El Chapo's inner circle, particularly his trusted pilot. By tracking the pilot's travel patterns, the pilot's movements revealed a recurring travel route between the city and Mazatlan, a secluded resort city along Mexico's Pacific coast. This discovery suggested that El Chapo was using the pilot to shuttle him to a remote location where he could hide away from the intensifying manhunt. The pursuit was no longer a question of if they would capture him, but when. So, when intelligence pointed to a beachside hideout as El Chapo's likely location, Hogan recognized an opportunity. The remote nature of the area made it an ideal target for a low-risk operation. However, to maintain the element of surprise, the team needed to approach without alerting El Chapo or his crew. This meant employing an unconventional strategy, disguising themselves as civilians. Hogan and the Marines bought civilian clothing, blending in with the local population as they traveled to the beachside location. The disguise allowed them to move through the area without arousing suspicion, giving them the tactical advantage of surprise. Thankfully, their disguise efforts paid off as they successfully reached the vicinity of the hideout undetected, positioning themselves for the next phase of the mission. However, the big challenge now was identifying the exact apartment El Chapo was hiding. But on February 22, 2014, it was confirmed that Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán was hiding in a modest apartment complex right in the center of Mazatlan. So, in the early hours of the morning, Hogan, alongside the Mexican Marines, approached the complex under the cover of darkness, maintaining strict silence to avoid alerting El Chapo's guards. The target apartment was on the 4th floor, a nondescript unit that offered El Chapo an inconspicuous hideout. Hogan was expecting a severe shootout from El Chapo's guards and defenses. So, at approximately 6:40 am, the Marines breached the apartment's reinforced door, moving swiftly to neutralize any resistance. But inside, surprisingly, they found only El Chapo with his wife, Emma Coronel, and their twin daughters. El Chapo was genuinely shocked. He was completely taken by surprise and could not offer any resistance as he was placed under arrest. Andrew Hogan was shocked yet happy as El Chapo was escorted out of the apartment in handcuffs, flanked by Marines. The arrest marked the end of his reign as one of the most powerful and feared drug lords in history. The team had achieved what many believed to be impossible: the capture of Joaquín Guzmán, the leader of the Sinaloa Cartel. Immediately, Hogan called his wife, and together with their children, they left Mexico and returned to the U.S. to everyone. That was the end of that chapter, and life was to move on. In fact, Hogan had resigned from the DEA to join a private corporation. However, despite the monumental success of his 2014 capture, Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán's story took another dramatic turn on July 11, 2015, when he escaped from the Altiplano maximum security prison in Mexico. Andrew Hogan was at the airport preparing for his flight from Paris back to the U.S. when his wife texted him, "C is out." C, which means Chapo. Apparently, this time, again, the escape was a meticulously planned operation, showcasing the depth of El Chapo's resources and influence. The plot involved a mile-long tunnel dug directly beneath his cell's shower stall, which was the only area not covered by security cameras. From the CCTV footage released, El Chapo was seen pacing back and forth across his cell room and suddenly disappeared into a small hole, which turned out to be a tunnel. The tunnel was a marvel of engineering, complete with lighting, ventilation, and even a motorcycle mounted on rails to expedite the escape. By the time guards discovered he was missing, El Chapo was already long gone. The escape was a severe blow to Mexican authorities and an embarrassment on the global stage. It reignited fears of El Chapo rebuilding his empire and intensified the pressure on law enforcement to recapture him. As expected, the manhunt that followed El Chapo's escape was even more relentless than before. Of course, Andrew Hogan had since left Mexico, but the lessons from his operations remained central to the efforts of the DEA and Mexican Marines. Surveillance and intelligence once again played a critical role as authorities tracked El Chapo's movements through his communication channels and trusted associates. The breakthrough came in early 2016 when intelligence pinpointed El Chapo's location in Los Mochis, Sinaloa. On January 8, 2016, Mexican Marines launched a raid on the house where he was hiding. The operation began with a firefight between the Marines and El Chapo's bodyguards, resulting in several casualties among his security team. 5 of El Chapo's guards were killed in the shootout, while only 1 Mariner sustained minor injuries. El Chapo attempted to flee through the underground tunnel and burst out at one of the city's sewer systems, which was a strategy that had worked for him in the past. However, this time, the Marines were prepared. They had blocked key exit points, forcing him to surface untimely and attempt an escape in a stolen car. Unfortunately for him, the first car they hijacked broke down just a few miles after the hijack. This made them steal another, which also broke down less than 5 miles from the city center. Also, these 2 hijacking incidents were immediately reported to the local authorities, which made it easy for them to track where the cars were and where El Chapo might be. To them, if the 2 cars had broken down and no other car hijack had been reported, then El Chapo and his right hand must have continued their escape on foot, which means they could not be too far from the scene. What they didn't know was that, in fact, another local authority law enforcement had arrested El Chapo and taken him to a motel. It was at this motel that El Chapo was captured yet again by the Marines. However, the big question that remained unanswered to date was why the police officer chose to take El Chapo to a motel instead of the police station. However, Hogan had a conspiracy theory that El Chapo might have threatened the officer that he would not only kill him but rape his wife and daughters while torturing his sons and brothers to death. This makes sense, as this is one of the domineering methods he had used in the past for his captives. Anyway, the Marines soon caught a wave of El Chapo's new location and swapped in immediately, where he was again caught off guard. This time, his freedom was short-lived, and the Mexican officials vowed there would be no further escapes. Fearing another prison break, Mexican authorities approved El Chapo's extradition to the United States in January 2017. He was transferred under tight security to New York, where he faced federal charges for his role as the leader of the Sinaloa Cartel. El Chapo's trial began in November 2018 and lasted 3 months. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, including testimonies from former cartel members, intercepted communications, and detailed accounts of his operations. The trial exposed the inner workings of the cartel, revealing the corruption, violence, and complexity that sustained El Chapo's empire. In February 2019, 5 years after his second arrest, El Chapo was found guilty on all counts, including drug trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder, and money laundering. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole plus 30 years. He was also ordered to forfeit $12.6 billion, the estimated proceeds of his drug empire. El Chapo was sent to the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility in Florence, Colorado, commonly known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. The prison is designed to house the most dangerous and high-profile inmates, ensuring there would be no chance of escape.